Recording. Okay, good to see you. Stalwarts in trying to understand the meaning of emptiness according to Chandrakirti, especially interpreted by Lama Tsong, but always based on Nagarjuna, who based himself on the Buddha's teachings themselves, especially the Prajnaparamita Sutras. So we're going to begin with some prayers, which it's very good if you know these, because when the Dalai Lama teaches or other Lamas teaching, almost always they will begin with some variation of combination of these. Sangye Chorang Soki Chognam La Changchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sognam Ki Rola Penche Sangye Drupa Sho. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. So the Supreme Assembly, when usually we say Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, here, when you take Mahayana refuge, you're emphasizing the Arya Bodhisattva Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma today, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chognam La Jangchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sognam Ki Rola Penche Sangye Drupa Sho. And then if you don't have a mandala plate, you can make the mudra of the mandala, or just visualize. Through offering this ground anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy such a pure realm. O holy and pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. So a request like this often is done at the beginning of the teachings when the mandala is offered, requesting the teacher to turn the wheel of Dharma to alleviate any imprints, obstacles in one's mind to receiving the teachings. I offer this jeweled mandala to you, my Guru. Iram Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, thank you. So let's begin with a little meditation.
Just a little.
Yes, someone had a question? Okay, I thought someone said just. So sit comfortably, your spine erect, eyes partially closed, hands at your navel if possible. Watch your breathing. When you recognize it, focus your mindfulness upon it, to the exclusion of other thoughts that might intrude in your mind. So you can add two things to recognize the breathing. Recognize when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out. And if you want to be like a Swiss school teacher to yourself, you can count the breaths. So one cycle would be one. So this is the first inhalation. This is the first exhalation, like that. And if you lose track of the number, or whether you're breathing in or breathing out, go back to one. And if you've been successful in calming your mind that way, let's move on to the mental consciousness and its nature. If you haven't been successful, you can keep on meditating that way. But now turn your attention and subsequently your mindfulness to the mental consciousness, which we initially know through its contents, because the mind itself is subtle enough not to be, its nature not to be recognizable. We usually think we know the mind through its activities. You know, you get angry, or you're happy, or have feelings, happiness, unhappiness, or suffering, or whatever. But the actual nature of the mind is clear light. The mind is that which is clear and knowing. So in that definition, although there are many interpretations of clear, here that clarity means it's lack of obstruction to the arisal, the entry into the mind of the mental sphere, you know, objects of the mental sphere, the Dharma Dhatu, and poses no hindrance to their reabsorption, their disappearance, like a cloud disappearing on a sunny day due to the sunlight. It doesn't go anywhere. It just completely reabsorbs into the air. Somewhat similar to that with the sun of your wisdom analyzing, watching the mental content, recognizing that they are adventitious, that they are not the nature of the mind, and that the mind's lack of obstruction is what allows them to be present, focus on that subjective mind rather than the objective thought, let them disappear. This is our conventional Buddha nature, the conventional clear light nature of the mind, not its ultimate clear light nature, but familiarity with this conventional clear light nature of the mind prepares you for meditation on the ultimate clear light nature of the mind, the emptiness of the mind. So as mentioned in the sutras, as holiness is emphasized, once you've realized emptiness, to apply it to the mental consciousness itself. If you can realize the ultimate nature of the mind, its lack of inherent existence, its ultimate clear light nature, your spiritual progress can be especially quick. So that's what we're hoping to do in our course. As we realize emptiness, as we do meditation, we'll switch at some point from meditating on the conventional clear light nature of the mind to the ultimate clear light nature of the mind, due to our wisdom being developed through hearing, thinking, and meditating. So the significance of this auspicious moment where we can do so much for our future lives, even for our present life, Dharma-wise, arising out of this clear light nature of the mind, conventional clear light nature of the mind. The Buddha said this was highly meaningful, difficult to find, again, auspicious moment like this, and easily lost. I think we should use this now while we have it as much as we can to accumulate virtue, to purify negativity, to abstain from negativity to begin with, and then to purify negativity that's still there. Why? In order to have a happy rebirth in future life, absolute minimum or intermediate to achieve liberation from samsara. But as the Buddha praised bodhicitta and the attainment of enlightenment as the goal of those of his followers that were of sharp intellect, I think I must become a Buddha. Why? Maybe if we start from that point, first of all, that enthusiasm, because the Buddha said we should aim for enlightenment, we investigate why. Because all living beings are in the same plight as myself, trapped in cyclic existence, the ocean of cyclic existence. Most of them without any spiritual guide in the sense of really leading them. Maybe they have the titular head of the Catholic Church or the Imam of Iran or something like that, but someone who's actually leading them spiritually, they're bereft. We have spiritual friends. We have a perfect life of leisure and endowment. And all of these sentient beings are exactly equal to us in wanting to be free of suffering, wanting to be happy, to be endowed with happiness, but they're never satisfied with whatever samsaric happiness they find. They're always looking for more. Maybe the main, that desire, maybe the main cause of our problems in cyclic existence, especially now. Out of compassion for these sentient beings, remembering also their kindness to us when they've been our mother, numberless times, each time very kind, so depthlessly kind. We don't recognize them as mother now because of that gap of time since they were our physical mother. To achieve that state of enlightenment for their sake, I need to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom, which are explained especially in Chandrakirti's Ajamakavatara, but also implicit in Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. Lama Tsong explaining upon it again and again, expounding, explicating. So I think I'm going to participate. I'm going to listen, contemplate, and meditate on the discourse on the illumination of the intent. Lama Tsongkhapa's Gompa Rabsal. For the purpose of achieving enlightenment to benefit sentient beings, but through sequence, listening in order to accumulate merit, wisdom, the collections of merit and wisdom, in order to achieve the form and truth bodies of a Buddha. so that I can effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error lead all sentient beings out of suffering into that same state, however long it takes. Maybe it takes eons to lead some sentient beings, but with the perfection of perseverance, not being discouraged, that we try to practice now also, that can be accomplished. I think I'm going to listen to the teachings, contemplate and meditate in order to become a Buddha, to benefit all mother sentient beings. Okay, thank you very much. So a couple of people have come on. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, KT. Cyril is here. Well, I don't remember, but it will show up. Oh, there's Cyril. Hi, Cyril. Paul, could you send a message to John, say, where are you? Joking. Okay, so good to see you. How are we doing? Any questions from last time, or general questions? Some sad news. Mikhail is not with us this morning or this afternoon because his mom passed away this morning. He messaged me earlier today and said it's quite sad. He's quite sad. And so he won't be here. We will do dedications for his, dedications for his mom, whose name is pronounced, Nadine, can you remind me?
Ute, land in Europe.
Utta. So we will, I think she was what, 91, Nadine? Something like that, something like that. So we'll do dedications at the end and think of her. Cyril has his hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a little distorted.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for the teaching, dear George. Yes, I have a question related to...
It's a bit distorted, Cyril. Maybe in the preferences in Zoom, if you go to the audio preferences and turn the input volume down for sound.
Better like that?
Say again?
Better like that?
Okay, we'll try. I don't know if others can hear you, but continue. Ask your questions. It's
Yes.
There's a lot of distortion.
Okay. Like that, is it better?
Marginally.
Sorry?
Maybe speak just a little bit softer.
I would log out and come back in again. That would be one. Try that.
Just
Okay.
try your question once, Cyril. What is your question?
Yes, I have a question related to just what you have said just a few minutes ago, related to awareness of the clear light and conventional and ultimate nature of...
It's really difficult. I could kind of make out what you're saying is really difficult. If you could maybe log out and log back in, as Shankar had suggested. Check your audio.
It's unplug. It's your microphone. If you unplug it, because you're wearing a microphone.
Do you have a microphone on your laptop?
Yes, included on the...
Because it's the microphone that you're using. So unplug it and see.
No, it is not unpluggable. It's built in the computer.
Mm.
Let's leave for a while. It's for Uta
Leave and come back, I think.
to figure that out. We'll get back to that. Okay. So, Uta, Cyril, we'll wait for Cyril to get back. So, where we were in the last class was in a section where we had some quotations from the meeting of the Father and Son Sutra, and Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned that Chandrakirti quoted it via Shantideva's compendium of training, Siksha Samuchaya, as though that gave more authority to it, perhaps. And so that quotation was just where we were last time. Of these two, that would mean of these two truths, of these two, the Tathagata sees the conventional to be the purview of the world. That which is the ultimate is ineffable, not an object of knowledge, not an object of detailed knowledge, not an object of thorough knowledge, is not shown. So we talked a little bit about that. So that was a sort of scriptural citation to prove, and there are others, not the only citation, but an important one to prove that the Buddhas see the two truths. Of these two, the Tathagata sees the conventional to be the purview of the world. That which is the ultimate is ineffable. It is not an object of knowledge, not an object of detailed knowledge, is not an object of thorough knowledge, is not shown. The meaning of the statement that the ultimate truth is not knowable is that it is not an object of cognition in the manner that I will explain below when interpreting a passage from the Entering the Two Truths Sutra. So this is what we were finishing last time. Otherwise, if the ultimate is not an object of any cognition at all, this will contradict the statement found in that same meeting of the Father and Son Sutra, that because the Buddha has directly actualized both conventional and ultimate truth, and ultimate truth, namely meaning emptiness, he is defined as the omniscient one. And Lama Tsongkhapa said, I will touch upon this point about the Buddhist cognition of the two truths more extensively in a section below as well. And Jimpa's note 420 says that appears later in relation to the resultant ground, which is way near the end of the text. So we won't go into that right now. That's on pages 533 to 539. Okay, so that's where we got last time. And then I had read this next paragraph. So what's being talked about here is this quotation from the Bodhisattva-charyavatara. The conventional and the ultimate are accepted to be the two truths. The ultimate is not an object of the intellect, or you could say not an object of the mind. The intellect is said to be conventional. That's what we're talking about, all these arguments. So here it says, as for the identification of conventional truth in the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, it is not that the intellect alone should be taken as such. The intended referent is the object of the intellect. So what is that referring to? That's referring to the fourth line of that Jimpa translated. The intellect is said to be conventional. And how did Jeffrey translate that? He translated that as awarenesses are said to be conventionalities. So Jimpa translated it, the intellect is said to be conventional. Jeffrey translated lo, the Tibetan word that's translated as intellect, he translated as awarenesses, plural. Awarenesses are said to be conventionalities. So that's the line in question here. as for the identification of conventional truth, it is not that the intellect or the awareness alone should be taken as a conventionality. That's not the main point. It is true, it's a conventionality, but the intended referent is the object of the intellect. Make sense? Okay. So just as the sutra states this to be the purview of the world, or the sphere of the worldly beings, or as Jeffrey translates, moreover, since the meeting of the Father and Son Sutra speaks of those objects of awareness as the province of the world, they are objects found within the province, that is, as objects of activity, of worldly, that is to say, conventional consciousness comprehending falsities. Hence the meaning of Shantideva's assertion that objects of awareness are conventionalities is to be taken that way. I'll read Jimpa's translation. That was mostly Jeffrey's. Just as the sutra states this to be the purview of the world, conventionalities, here too it refers to facts obtained within the sphere of experience or from the purview of the world or conventional consciousness, which perceives false realities. Worldly conventional consciousness perceives falsities. So it's within that sphere that conventionalities are being talked about. This is how one should understand the sense in which the object of the intellect constitutes the conventional truth. A lot of words, but make sense? Okay. The division of objects into two truths underlies the point that all objects of knowledge are exhausted within this twofold division. Remember what we mean? Exhausted. So exhausted, you may be familiar with exhaustion when you've worked hard or, you're studying, you feel exhausted. Here, exhausted is meaning a little bit different, right? It means that the divisions of objects of knowledge underlies the point that all objects of knowledge are completely included in, exhausted within this twofold division. All objects of knowledge, they are found within these two truths. So you could say they are exhausted that way. Does that wording make problem for anyone? Maybe that's clear. That's kind of clear, right? For a scriptural citation on this point, there is the passage from the meeting of Father and Son Sutra quoted above. And this is also stated explicitly in the meditation on the definite revelation of suchness, which Jippa notes seems to be another name for the meeting of the Father and Son Sutra. Do you see ever, Paul, or have you ever heard, Paul, the meditation on the definite revelation of suchness as being a separate text from the meeting of the Father and Son?
Not off the top of my head, Venerable George.
Jeffrey doesn't mention that it is identical with that, but note 421 says, this appears to be the subtitle of the meeting of Father and Son Sutra. So this is again a quotation from that. Why it's called by this different name, unclear. So the quotation is, there is the conventional and likewise the ultimate. There is never such a thing as a third truth. Or as Jeffrey translated, the conventional and likewise the ultimate. there is not at all a third truth. And the Lama Tsongkhapa continues, the commentary also, meaning Chandrakirti's auto-comment, or his bhasham, says, so this is quoting from Chandrakirti's commentary when he introduced that verse in his comment in his text. Likewise, whatever other truths there may be, all of those should be ascertained as encompassed by either of the two truths. So that's another word for exhausted, encompassed, you could say, if you find difficult with that. And just to be, yeah, so there's no commentary in his note there. Likewise, whatever other truths there may be, all of these should be ascertained as encompassed in either of the two truths. So what does that mean? What other truths are there than the two truths? I gave away the bag. What other truths are there other than the two truths? Well, the four truths, but they are encompassed in the two truths. Snehi, of the four truths, I should say, which are conventional truths and which are ultimate truths?
I think the first, second, and fourth are conventional truths, and cessation would be the ultimate truth.
Truth is cessation.
But I guess maybe they're all conventional truths.
For some of the lower schools, the truth of cessation can be a conventional truth, but for the Prasangika, Lama Tsongkhapa, Chandrakirti point out, truth of cessation is an ultimate truth, is an emptiness. So we touched a little bit about that. There will be a big section about that in the future. So that's right. So the first, second, and fourth truths are conventional truths, and the third truth is an ultimate truth.
But I changed my mind on that, Venerable George, because I mean, initially I thought that what I said first was correct. Then I thought, but I remember reading in Nagarjuna, where he says samsara, nirvana are of the same nature. So then I thought, well, maybe you could argue that, even samsara and nirvana are conventional truth. I'm not sure.
Every phenomena that exists has a conventional truth, right? Every phenomena has two truths. So even nirvana or cessation has a conventional truth. So So samsara and nirvana. What did he say?
I don't know. I thought it was, I'm sure Paul or someone else may remember more accurately, that samsara and nirvana are basically of the same nature, or there's no difference between the two. I can't remember the exact.
If you said they're the same nature,
I did, but I'm not sure if he said that.
They are both empty of inherent existence.
Right. Yes.
So I think that perhaps is what's being got at. I haven't forgot you, Cyril. We'll get back to you in a little while as you've come back on. So let me read it again. In this way, the commentary explains how the numerous enumerations bearing the word truth found in the 10 Grounds Sutra, the Sutra of the 10 Bhumis, the Dasha Bhumika, are encompassed within the two truths. So what in numerous enumerations bearing the word truth found in the 10 Ground Sutra, does anyone know any of those? What the context is? Again, Lama Tsongkhapa expects everyone to be scholars and maybe memorize the Dasha Bhumika. So 84,000.com, this wonderful translation project, has a translation of the Dasha Bhumika, although there's some others. The Dasha Bhumika Ten Bhumi Sutra is found within the Avatamsaka Sutra, as Paul kindly pointed out earlier. So I'm going to read you a little section here from the Dasya Bhumika, chapter 1, starting at verse 405. So it says, then the Bodhisattva, put my reading glasses on here. All right. Then the Bodhisattva Vajragarbha, in order to teach the meaning of this bhumi and to analyze it, recited these verses. So this is in relation to the fifth bhumi. And you might say, well, wait a second, we're on the sixth bhumi, but the fifth bhumi and the sixth bhumi have, because of that transition, there's a lot in common. So the next verse, 406, says, those who are purified in the four conducts of the jinas, of the conquerors, contemplate with their discernment the sameness of the three times. Through the purity of contemplation of correct conduct and ascertainment of the path, and with an understanding that is free of doubt, they ascend to the fifth. And there's a couple of other verses saying, through various kinds of practices, they ascend to the fifth bhumi. So this is upon attainment of the fifth bhumi. So in just after those verses like that, there's one 411. They gather the accumulation of merit and also the highest wisdom. So the two collections. With a variety of methods, they cause the radiance of the bhumi to shine. They have the blessing of the Buddhas. They have mindfulness. And they've acquired intelligence and understanding, and they contemplate the entirety of the four truths. So there, 412 says, they perfectly realize the ultimate truth and the truth of relative characteristics, the difference between the truths, the certainty of the truths, and thus also the truth of things, the termination of outflows, and the truth of the path up to the truth of non-obscuration. So that verse 412 mentions several other kinds of truths that you might think are different than the two truths. I'll just read one more verse here. They thus have subtle understanding through examining the truths, but they have not attained the unobscured highest liberation. They are greatly dedicated to wisdom and therefore surpass the Pratika Buddha Arhats who developed qualities in this world. And the last verse I want to quote, the next verse, he has true understanding through realizing the truths, and he knows the false nature of composite phenomena to be without essence. The great radiance of love and compassion of the Sugatas is attained, and he seeks the wisdom of the Sugatas for the benefit of beings. So this is all talking about the person who has just attained the fifth bhumi, that important verse 412. So it says, they perfectly realize the ultimate truth and the truth of relative characteristics. Almost sounds like something different than relative truth. They realize the difference between the truths, the certainty of the truths. They also, and thus also the truth of things, the truth of the termination of outflows, and the truth of the path up to the truth of non-obscuration. So in regard to that, that's the quotation that's being, Lama Tsongkhapa is assuming we know here. In the 10 Ground Sutra, the word, we say, in this way, the commentary explains how the numerous enumerations bearing the word truth found in the 10 Ground Sutra are encompassed within the two truths, exhausted within the two truths. There, the truth to be understood by means of differentiation, Jumpa translates, is identified as referring to the presentation of the aggregates, elements, and sources. So this master, Chandrakirti, also accepts the division of truth into two as exhaustive. So that might have gone right past you. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, through Jimpa's translation, they're the truth to be understood by means of differentiation. So in our quotation, that was the one that said the certainty, maybe the difference between the truths. So if you're interested, Doris is going to put up a PDF of this. Doris, is that easily available to you?
It is. I just didn't know which one you wanted, the one with the multiple citations or the one specifically on verse 12.
On verse 12. Yeah, this and that. Verse 412. There she is. So if you go to, where do you go to? Oh, chat. Here we go. So Doris is, okay. So if you have that, pops up quite easily on my screen. So this is from the 84,000 translation. So this is the verse I just read, amongst others. They perfectly realize the ultimate truth and the truth of relative characteristics, the difference between the truths, the certainty of the truths, and thus also the truth of things, the termination of outflows, and the truth of the path up to the truth of non-obscuration. So Paul kindly, from his archive, Hackett archive, supplied this transliteration of the Tibetan. So in that verse, there are little notes, you see. The note 267 says, according to the Sanskrit, there is one, that's the word that's being there. The Tibetan has Nampa Chepe Dempa, which is what Lama Tsongkhapa is talking about here in that quotation. Nampa Chepe Dempa Tokpa, the realization of the, how did Jeffrey translate it? Identification of ultimate truth. Or is that, did I just skip past that?
Venerable George, would you like me to share the screen for the text that Doris just?
Yeah, if you haven't downloaded, has everyone downloaded, or is it you need to have it on the screen?
On the screen is better.
Okay, on the screen is better. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, from the Hackett archive. There you see. The second line says Nampa Chepe Dempa. And then it says Dejan, likewise, Tak Dendang. And then at the end of the sentence, and the end of the fourth line, it says Raptu Tok. So he realizes the truth of Nampa Chepe Dempa, or realizes the Nampa Chepe Dempa. And I'm trying to find where we are here. So Jimpa translated that as the truth to be understood by means of differentiation. That's what Jimpa is translating that as. Whereas Jeffrey translates that as what? The truth of differentiated realization. Okay, so that's the one that's being talked about here. So that, if you're interested, you can, if you scroll down, Snehi, just a little on that. So if I've amended in here from that 84,000 translation, the footnotes that some of you who are interested may find useful in understanding that verse. Maybe not. Okay, I think you can take that off, Sneh. Thank you. So Jimpa's translation is there, the truth to be understood by means of differentiation. So this is kind of explaining, it sounds like a new truth other than the two truths or the four truths, right? But there, this truth to be understood by means of differentiation is identified as referring to the presentation of the aggregates, elements, and sources. What do we say? Pumpo, Keche, and Kam, the various presentation of things, which we've talked about many times, right? So this master Chandrakirti too also accepts this division of the two truths into two as exhaustive. Okay, how are we doing? Making sense? KT, are you there?
Yes, I'm out here. Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So we're taking when we say the truths that are being differentiated, could we think of this as we have examined kind of the four mindfulnesses and dovetailed that into aggregates and constituents and sources and four noble truths and path, and we've really thought deeply.
Mainly, it's not talking about just all these other enumerations, but when you're talking about sometimes in various sutras, there's mentioned different kinds of truths, quote unquote. Most, as the beginning of the quotation of the Bodhisattva entering in the fifth bhumi, it talked about especially the four truths. He or she has a special expertise in analyzing the four truths. But then in addition, there are these other things that are within the purview, within their knowledge, what they meditate on, other kinds of truths. But those other things that are called truths are all included within the two truths. That's the main point. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So then, here is the reasoning. Jempa translates. When something is determined to be false and deceptive, then its being non-deceptive and true must be necessarily negated. Make sense? What are we doing here? Right. Or as Jeffries translates, the reasoning, and then he has in brackets, the reasoning why there are only two truths is as follows. If a certain base, in other words, if a certain object is on the positive side distinguished as a falsity, a deceptive object, then on the exclusionary side, it must be eliminated that it is a non-deceptive suchness, due to which deceptive and non-deceptive are dichotomous, explicit contradictories. So if you were to read, at this point, if you were to read Jeffries alone, unless you were like a super, reading the Tibetan super geek translator, that would sound more complicated. Jimpa's makes it much more simple. He says, here is the reasoning. Or as Jeffrey had said, the reasoning is the following. Here is the reasoning. What is the reasoning? That there are two truths. That's what we're trying to, we've got scriptural citations for that. Now, this is a logical reasoning. All the time in analyzing the scriptures and the studies, the objects of meditation, you sometimes apply scriptural citations to understand through your faith in the Buddha, and also through the authority like that. And also you apply reasoning, and you alternate between the two. They help one another. So here's the reasoning, not just the scriptural citation. When something is determined to be false and deceptive, then it's being non-deceptive and true, or maybe to put it in the same order, then it's being true and non-deceptive. If something is false and deceptive, maybe you could just say one of those. If it's false, if it's deceptive, then it's being non-deceptive or true must be necessarily negated. What does that mean? It means that those two form a dichotomy. Paul, what did they say? Is there a more, another word for that?
Another word for
Dichotomy.
I'm just
So
well,
what is a dichotomy?
well, dichotomy would be two things basically, right? So they would be mutually exclusive.
That's it.
A dichotomy is something that if it's not one, it has to be the other.
Right.
If it's not the other, it doesn't exist. So a dichotomy has to include everything. The whole.
I think the phrase they use is the law of the excluded middle, right? That there's no third option. That a middle between the two, it does not exist. A middle is excluded.
Right. That is mentioned a lot in Western philosophical studies, and also in Western philosophical analyses of Buddhism. I'm not quite sure where that comes. Does that come from Aristotle or Aristotelian logic?
Something like that, yeah.
The law of the excluded middle. Okay, so here, the two truths form a dichotomy. It's nothing new. It's what we said before. All phenomena are exhausted in these two truths. That means if you think of a big set of all phenomena, if your mind can encompass that, all phenomena, and you take out all of the conventional truths, what are left are the ultimate truths. If you take out those ultimate truths, there's nothing left. There's nothing that you can find that exists that is not an ultimate truth or a conventional truth. Okay, so Jimpa says, when something is determined to be false and deceptive, then its being non-deceptive and true must be necessarily negated. Okay, that's another point. So if it is a ultimate truth, that negates it being a conventional truth. And emptiness itself is a ultimate truth. It is not a conventional truth. It has a conventional truth when you describe it, but it is not, it is an ultimate truth and not a conventional truth. Then Jimpa continues, this is because being deceptive and being non-deceptive, being true and being false and being true are direct opposites. That's another way of saying here, direct opposites, mutually excluding each other. So if it is one, that excludes it being the other. Given this, the two truths must pervade the entire class of knowables, and as such, they exclude any third possibility that is both or neither. So sometimes when we talk about, like for instance, when we talked about production, right? Production from self, production from other, production from both, production from neither. Well, you say, yeah, neither meant causelessly. So those are sometimes, when we talk about the four alternatives, those sometimes are added. But here, as it pervades the entire class of nobles, these two truths exclude any third possibility that is both, something which is both a conventional truth and an ultimate truth. Oh, wait a second. Isn't a sprout a conventional truth and an ultimate truth? Jennifer?
I believe it's a conventional truth.
Cautiously.
Well, I was like, is it a trick question?
No, it's just that, you know, we can come back to that dilemma sometime, but isn't a sprout have an ultimate truth? It does have an ultimate truth, but the sprout itself, as you correctly stated, is a conventional truth. Given this, the two truths must pervade the entire class of nobles, and as such, they exclude any third possibility that is both a conventional truth and an ultimate truth, or something which is neither an ultimate truth or a conventional truth. You know, is there something like that that's not an ultimate truth or a conventional truth? No. If it exists, I mean, you can hypothesize something like that, just like you can hypothesize the horns of a rabbit or the sons of a barren woman, but they don't exist. So there is nothing which is not an ultimate truth or a conventional truth. Making sense? Not so difficult, right? This is as stated, for example, in The Light of the Middle Way. Who wrote The Light of the Middle Way? Does anyone know? Rachel, do you know?
It's in Jeffries Hopkins' translation, and it says Kamala Shila. So I cheated.
Oh, okay. Right, that's good. Kamala Shila. So Kamala Shila and Bhava Viveka wrote various texts on the middle way. And Kamala Shila's text was one that we've quoted before several times. Kamala Shila was a Prasangika? Sean, do you remember?
I don't think so.
Was it Chittamatran?
Probably.
No, Kamala Shila was the teacher who came to Tibet at the suggestion of Padmasambhava, and he was the one who had the famous debate with the Chinese Hashan. Are you there?
Yeah.
Or you multitask? You've got some other things to do. So he was a Svatantrika Madhyamika, and among the Svatantrikas, which was he? Was he a Sautrantika Svatantrika or Yogacara Svatantrika? Shankar, you remember?
If I remember correctly, he was a Yogacara Svatantrika, but I'm not sure.
Is that right, Paul?
We're talking about Kamala Shila?
Kamala Shila was
Yogacara Svatantrika Madhyamika.
Yeah. So Bhava Viveka himself, who was the opponent of Chandrakirti in that famous debate that we talked about, discourse, criticism, and so forth. He was a Sautrantika Svatantrika, and some of his disciples were also that. But Kamala Shila and who was the other one?
Shantarakshita.
Shantarakshita were both Yogacara Svatantrika Madhyamika. So they're Madhyamika, close to the Prasangika view, but not quite. But anyway, some of the statements are considered to be authoritative. So he says, this is as stated in The Light of the Middle Way. Those that have the characters of mutually excluding each other are such that when one is eliminated, through negative determination. I think you could just say when one is negated, its opposite is not affirmed through positive determination. If its opposite is not affirmed through positive determination, then its opposite has no existence. So that's more or less what I was saying before. If you have this set of all phenomena, if you can negate one of these two truths, because he says those that have the character of, well, he's talking about mutual things that are mutually exclusive, dichotomies. Those that have the characters of mutually excluding each other are such that when one is eliminated through negative determination, if its opposite is not affirmed through positive determination, then its opposite has no existence. Does that make sense? What do you think, Shaka?
It makes sense. However, I'm not clear as to why the clause, if its opposite is not affirmed through, I mean, if you negate it, and in negative determination, can you ever have the opposite be?
Well, let's say the horns of, let's say the son of a barren woman. So if you've eliminated that the son of a barren woman is an ultimate truth, or if you've eliminated that it's an ultimate truth, if you can't prove that it's a conventional truth, then it must not exist.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay. Yes, yes. That makes sense. I understand.
Yeah, so all of these little things, you say, well, I heard that before, but that's the same thing, but all looking at it from slightly different angles, kind of like I mentioned before in the debating courtyard, and when you do analytical meditation yourself, or you debate with others, discuss with others, all of that causes you to look at things from different angles so that it becomes more clear. Okay. Jennifer, what do you think? You're smiling. Why?
I can help myself.
It doesn't, you can't help it. Okay. Okay. So that's a quotation from the Light of the Middle Way. So the two truths are a dichotomy. All phenomena are included in the two truths. Oh, and then there was a final line to that. To conceive of something that is neither of the two is illogical. That's what Kamalashila said. And so Jeffrey's translation of that was, phenomena that have the character of being a dichotomy are such that if something is refuted to be one and it is not established to be the other, then it does not exist. Therefore, it also is not reasonable to think of it as a class, to think of it as in a class that is neither of those two. Okay. What do they say in Arabic? Halas, enough. When I lived in Beirut, I had to know some basic Arabic to talk to the cab drivers and everything. When you got to the desert, halas, just enough. Okay. So then Lama Tsongkhapa continues also, I guess, with another quotation from Kamalashila's text, The Light of the Middle Way. Those two things, of which one does not exist if it is not established through positive determination, when its opposite is eliminated through negative determination, mutually exclude each other. So if you leave off the first part of the sentence, you're just talking about these two things, which are a dichotomy. They mutually exclude one another. What does that mean, mutually exclude one another? Snehi, do you have an idea?
I was just thinking of like a simple example, like hot and cold. If something is cold, it's not hot. They mutually exclude each other.
And the word mutually means it works, if it's not hot, if it's hot, it's not cold. And then if you go to the other side, mutually, if it's cold, it's not hot, right? Good. They mutually exclude one another. Those characterized by such mutual exclusion are pervasive with respect to everything. And that which pervades everything eliminates any other possibilities. So two truths pervade everything. Take, for example, the case of an embodied being and a non-embodied being. What does that mean? Nadine, you know.
I read ahead, and this sentence is so different to Tintinpas and Jeffrey Hopkins' text.
Right.
I wanted to ask you because Jeffrey Hopkins' translation makes much more sense to me.
Right, right. So here, Jeffrey translated that as follows, that which we just read, where Jimpa said those two things, of which one does not exist if it is not established. So Jeffrey says, two that are such that something does not exist if it is neither of them, have the character of being a dichotomy. Well, that's a nice, so the character, what is a character or definition of a dichotomy? Two things, when you have a dichotomy, such that something does not exist if it is neither of them. If it is not hot and not cold, or if it's not ultimate truth and not a conventional truth, it doesn't exist. I'm not sure it works with hot and cold. So you could have lukewarm water, like Goldilocks porridge or something like that. Not too hot, not too cold. Okay. Then he continues. Those that have the character of being a dichotomy cover all aspects. And then he has in brackets to explain what that means. That is to say, whatever exists is either one or the other. Those that cover all aspects eliminate other categories. Examples are, for instance, particular pairs such as the physical and non-physical, and so forth. This is also to be understood with respect to all other explicit contradictories, which is to say dichotomies. So, yeah, so what Jeffrey translated here, he has a note in his text when he says physical and non-physical, he says, Lu Chen Dang, Lu Chen Mayinpa. So, Rachel, do you do Tibetan translation? Do you know what Lu Chen usually means?
Possessing a body?
Usually Lu means body, right? That's the ordinary word. What's the honorific for body? Yeah, Ku.
Is it gu? Ku.
Ku. Yeah, maybe you pronounce gu. Like chuku, like dharma body or dharmakaya. Ku means kaya, is honorific, and the ordinary body, which is not, exalted like that, is called Lu. So Jimpa's right in a certain sense when he said what? Embodied and what was the last thing?
Non-embodied.
Non-embodied being. But Jeffrey also is pointing out that it could be translated as physical and non-physical. So what does that mean? If you were to take it as having a body or not having a body, that would make sense because all living beings either have a gross body where would they have gross bodies? Well, in the hell realms, the desire realm, let's say, and in the form realms, they all have bodies. But in the formless realm, they don't have bodies, right? They're Lucha and Mayimpa. They're unembodied. According to Tantra, they all have still have some subtle body, but that's not usually what we, when we're talking about having body, it's that which you perceive grossly. So that makes sense. But Jeffrey's also making sense if something is physical. What is it? Examples are, for instance, in particular pairs such as the physical and non-physical and so forth, that cover all aspects. So does that work also? Is that true? If something is not physical, if it doesn't have, maybe he's even meaning physical, like having a body. But anyway, if something is not form.
But what about
Go on.
what about light being both wave and particle?
Okay, leave that for a second. How about mind? What is mind? Is mind physical? Oh, hi, John. You just got back from the sun lamp.
I know. Had to walk fast.
Sorry. So thanks for coming. So physical and non-physical. So
Mind is physical.
Mind is physical?
Subtle. Yes, it's subtle. It's subtle physicality.
Mind.
But not usually included among rupa.
Now, yeah, so I'm not sure if Paul tilted his head the same way that I'm tilting mine. So usually when we talk
I had to give you something. I had to give you something.
Usually when we talk about, we say ngobo, when we talk about functioning things, they are either form, consciousness, or non-associated compositional factors, right? So consciousness is not form. Consciousness has its own continuum, which is not form. Would you agree, John?
Yes. Yes, that sounds exactly.
So were you just joking, or were you had some?
I wasn't joking so much as I was first of all giving you something to find me wrong about, and
okay,
then
good. Okay, I found you wrong. So
and also because are subtle things like tsalung tigle, are they ever considered form in the sense of subtle matter?
Subtle things like something and tigle. What was the second first thing?
Like subtle body elements of
the winds and the channels
lung,
drop.
Winds, the
tigle.
channels, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So they are considered physical. They're subtle matter, right? But here's the more interesting thing that John brought up inadvertently. Isn't mind inseparable from its mounted wind, the wind that it mounts? Aren't they inseparable?
I believe so, yes. Because if the mounting wind dissolves, then there's nothing to support that mind,
right?
That mental
So
consciousness.
For the gross minds, at the time of death, they disappear completely because their mounted winds disappear. But some subtle winds continue, such as the subtlemost wind that is, I want to say the mount, that which the subtlemost mind mounts. It is the mount of the subtlemost mind, right? The subtlemost mind and the subtlemost wind are inseparable, and I'll throw out at you here. They're one nature. What do you think, Paul? Are they one nature?
Are they one nature? I don't think so, because isn't it the case that at the time of enlightenment, the subtlemost mind becomes the side that becomes the Dharmakaya, and the
Wisdom Dharmakaya, yeah.
wisdom Dharmakaya, and the subtlemost wind that is its mount becomes the the Rubakaya.
Yeah, the Rubakayas.
Yes.
The basis of the Rubakayas.
So I would say that they are distinct.
Well, let's say the Buddhist mind is, it's said that still the wind and the mind, I say right now, our subtlemost wind and mind, before we attain Buddhahood, they are inseparable, like the horse rider, the jockey being super glued to the back of the horse, right? They can't be separated. There are some things that have that seem to be inseparable, but only for a certain amount of time, such as the indestructible drop at the heart. What is that, Sean? Do you know the indestructible drop at the heart? If you don't know, Rachel knows. I saw her subtly nodding there.
So what are you asking me about it?
What is it? What is the indestructible drop?
I thought it was the subtle wind and the subtle mind in union.
What is the indestructible drop, Rachel, according to Tantra?
Yeah, I nodded, and then I'm not capable of answering. Sorry.
Does anyone know? Louise, do you know?
Is it that which contains the most subtle wind and mind that moves on when the heaps collapse?
Right.
It's comprised of white and red elements from.
So at the time of conception, some of the white element from the father and the red element from the mother, meaning the sperm and blood, coalesce in the embryo, and it's within that the subtlemost mind and wind reside. That drop sometimes is represented by a sphere that's the top half of which is white, the bottom half is red, is called the indestructible drop. So during the life, that drop, that's a physical drop. That's not consciousness. That drop is indestructible this lifetime. It's called the indestructible drop. So that, as Louise noted, that forms the house, let's say, the mansion within which the subtlemost mind and wind reside. That subtlemost mind and wind are also indestructible, but indestructible forever. Whereas that indestructible drop is only indestructible during this lifetime. At the time of death, what happens to that? Does anyone know? KT, do you know what happens to the indestructible drop at the time of death?
Oh, I'm not sure exactly what happens to that drop.
It's destroyed.
So
the drop would be dissolved.
It's said to turn over, and the red element, the white element goes down and the red element comes up, some of which comes out the nostrils at the time of death. That's a sign of death, right? And some, let's say in a male anyway, I don't know if it's the same in a female, the white element come out. So for instance, if after some hours and there's some agitation of the corpse, and or maybe it's not the corpse yet because it's still consciousness is still there. If some white fluid comes out from the lower organ or red fluid comes out from the top or both, that's a sign that the subtlemost mind has left, because when that so-called indestructible drop destructs, it's destructed, that it leaves the body. They're no longer connected with one another, the two drops, and that which resided within them then leaves the body. Snehi, you're going to ask if we want to take a break, right? Okay, so before we do, so something to cogitate during the break, I want to thank the center, those of you who maybe not everyone knew or contributed, or maybe you contributed indirectly to this birthday gift to me, which I received through mailed by Jennifer, I think maybe organized by Jennifer, beautiful enlightenment stupa with the relics of Lama Zopa Rinpoche in it. Really, absolutely exquisitely crafted. It's from, it was made in Italy, originally, and said in Pumaya on their website, and I thought that meant at Instituto Lama Tsongkhapa, but it's actually, there was a group of people that started this group. What's it called, Jennifer? Stupa Orso?
Stupa Onless.
Onless. Yeah, I'm not sure what onless means, but I recognized a couple of people in that. There were older students, and it said it was actually their laboratory they set up to make, what, 500 of these? Something like that. And there's many others that they're making continually with the relics of Lama Zopa that was in the basement of a bar in Pumaya. So I'm not sure why they didn't have space at Instituto Lama Tsongkhapa. Maybe they're completely busy there. So I wanted to thank all of you. It was just absolutely exquisite. And just so you remember, the Tibetan term for stupa is chorten, right? You would say churten, but the word ten has a R superfix, so usually it's pronounced chorten. Sounds like it's like CHOR. So chorten is kind of, one etymology is a basis for offering. So stupas have existed before the Buddha in India as places where the relics of great beings were put. The Buddha's relics, he said, should be put in a stupa, and that people with faith, even if we don't have faith, if you come in contact with it, if you circumambulate that and so forth, like the famous story of the fly who circumambulated the stupa while sitting on some excrement that floated around the stupa, created the karma to become a monk eventually. Also, it's said to be the omniscient mind. The Buddha prophesied, said that his omniscient mind would reside in that stupa. So anyway, I wanted to thank you for that. We'll take a little break. Please continue discussing if you have ideas about the two truths or the subtlemost mind and when the indestructible drop. I will just disappear for a moment, but I'll leave my microphone on and I'll be listening to your discussions.
Anlus is just in it.
Thank you. I listened while I reclined on the floor and stretched my legs and did some other things. Scintillating discussion. Okay. The point I'm making is that some things, the question arose whether I think John had brought it up, whether the omniscient mind was, the wisdom Dharmakaya was no longer inseparable with this mounting wind. But that's the very basis for explaining about omnipotence, John. The Buddha's mind is omniscient, so pervades all things instantaneously. It's not like it has to go out or look there. It's there already because it's wind. Its mounted wind is there. And if you invoke the Buddha at any time, because the omniscient, right now where you are, the omniscient mind's mounting wind is present where you are, so the omniscient mind could manifest, knows what's happening, and the fact that the wind is there, it can manifest as a form at any point, at any time, like that. Okay, so the indestructible drop at the heart is only indestructible during this life. It's called indestructible because it's not changed during this life, but it's not indestructible the way that the subtlemost mind and subtlemost wind is. Okay, so that was a little what do you call it? Diversion or whatever.
Digression, tangent.
Digression, thank you. Okay, so we were talking about embodied being and non-embodied being as Jimpa translated, or physical and non-physical. Okay, so that was a second quotation from Kamalashila's talking about the two truths and what's this word? How did Jeffrey translate?
Current updated estimated time of departure.
Such as a physical and non-physical and so forth. This is also to be understood with the other explicit contradictories. That is dichotomies. Yeah. So we overheard Diana's travel plans. I'll just say that last sentence translated by Jeffrey. This is also to be understood with respect to all other explicit contradictories. That is, in other words, explicit contradictories means dichotomies. Okay, so we've exhausted that, right? Exhausting. Okay, so the text continues. This point should be understood in the context of all other examples of direct opposites. That's Jimpa's translation. Now, if an example of direct opposites that exclude the possibility of a third term cannot be shown, so if you were to have direct opposites that exclude a third possibility, if you couldn't show anything like that, there will then be no facility to engage in refutations based on critical analysis, where the possibilities are confined to binary terms, inquiring, quote, whether something does or does not exist, unquote, quote, whether it is one or many, unquote, and so forth. So there are many kinds of binary kinds of investigations that we do, whether it exists or not exist. You couldn't do that kind of analysis if they were not direct opposites, if they were not direct contradictories, if they were not dichotomies. Also, the famous analysis of whether the person is one or many, or the person is one with the aggregates or different from the aggregates. Those are all dichotomies, or those are all pairs like that. But if there do exist such examples of direct opposites, which we know there are, like conventional truth, ultimate truth, and so forth, then when one of the two terms within that direct opposition is negated, the other is not if the other is not established, then the other term has no existence. It sounds like a rephrasing of almost exactly the same thing we said before. Therefore, to say that there are no direct opposites in the Prasangika system, according to Prasangika Madhyamika, if one were to say there's no direct opposites, you always have to have other possibilities. That's wrong. That suggests a failure to become versed in the ways of refutation and affirmation, insofar as when one term in a direct opposition is eliminated, the other comes to be established. And when one is negated, the other is affirmed. There is no difference between Prasangika and Svatantrika Madhyamaka. I forgot what note is that. Note 425, right? So Jimpa's note says, in modern parlance, Tsongkhapa is stating that the suggestion that Madhyamaka rejects the law of the excluded middle, is not only unfounded, but those who make such an assertion will not be able to explain how many of the reasonings presented in the Madhyamaka sources that analyze in binary terms work. Making sense? So who can give a little more explanation of what the law of the excluded middle means? Jennifer, is it cold there?
It was raining all day,
Oh, okay.
so I'm a
Turtle
little
neck.
cold.
Good,
Yeah.
good. Who can explain? Does anyone know what the law of the excluded middle is? By her eyes, I think Louise is Googling or Wikipediaing. No one knows from the top of their head. John, what's the law of the excluded middle? Do you know?
Does it mean a commitment to a binary outcome? It's either one thing or the other.
I think it's just the up. Is it that? It says, in modern parlance, Tsongkhapa is stating that the suggestion that the Madhyamaka rejects the law of the excluded middle is not only unfounded, blah, blah, blah. So that means he's saying Tsongkhapa, the Madhyamaka does accept the law of the excluded middle. What's the excluded middle, Paul?
That there's a third option between two polar opposites.
Or a fourth option.
Or a fourth, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a third option, generally, you could say, or a fourth option. So those people who make that kind of assertion that the Madhyamaka doesn't accept the law of the excluded middle are just wrong. And but the Madhyamaka also accepts that certain kinds of phenomena, like for instance, production has to be either from self, from other, from both, or neither. So it's not everything has to be just binary like that, excluded middle. How are we doing? Making sense? Cyril, how is your microphone doing? Could say something?
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, still kind of. Well, just say something.
Thank you for the teaching, for example.
I didn't even understand what you said.
Okay, so maybe I'll fix the settings later.
Yeah. We'll think next, either in discussion group if you come, or in next class. Hopefully you'll have your microphone fixed and we can address your question. I'm really interested to know what you wanted to say.
Okay, I'll try to fix this for the next time.
Okay, so let's continue now. So we finished that section. that we started a while ago. This is a little bit long. What was this section called? I have to go back, search. This was further presentation of the two truths, right? So that had started with a quotation from the meeting of the Father and Son Sutra and so forth, mainly talking about the two truths as being direct opposites, dichotomies, and so forth. And we had all of those quotations, including from Kamala Shila's Light of the Middle Way. Okay, so now next outline, distinction within conventional truth from the perspective of the world, or as Jeffrey translates that on page 226, explaining the divisions of obscurational truths. Jimpa translates conventional truth. So that's all the same thing. Samvriti Satya, or in Tibetan we say Kunsob Dempa. That's the general way that you would write conventional truth. But it actually literally means obscurational truth. Kunsop Dempa, right? Kunsop, completely obscuring. So Jeffrey translates, explaining the divisions of obscurational truths, conventional truths in relation to the world, or as Jimpa says, from the perspective of the world. Okay, so now we're getting to the nitty-gritty. So what was the reason we've gone into this discussion of the truths? Because Chandrakirti pointed out that unless you understood the two truths, how they're related, what actually is conventional truth and everything, you couldn't just say, as some people would like to argue against the Prasangika, oh, come on, Prasangika, everyone in the world knows that things are produced from other. Remember, that was their contention. Why? What's the need for all this logic? You guys are just geeks, just logic geeks. And so Chandrakirti had pointed out, unless you understood how the worldly perspective could contradict certain things, you're just making up stuff. Your arguments have no validity. So now this is getting to the nitty-gritty. Distinctions within the conventional truth from the perspective of the world, Jimpa says. Of the two, objects and subjects within conventional truth, to state that the class of subjects includes, from the perspectives of worldly cognition, both those that are veridical and those that are distorted. What does veridical mean? What's he translating as veridical?
He's just translating true.
Truthful? Truthful?
Yangdakpa. Yangdakpa and Lokpa.
So we're going to talk about that in a second. So Jeffrey translates that among conventionalities, there are two types. So is that true? All conventionality, that doesn't come so much within Jimpa's translation. He says, of the two objects and subjects within conventional truth, Jeffrey's saying, among conventionalities, there are two types. Sort of like, not a dichotomy, or would it be that they're all conventionalities either have to be objects or subjects, right? That doesn't come in Jimpa's translation so much. Among conventionalities, there are two types, objects and subjects. And initially, Chandrakirti indicates that in relation to worldly consciousnesses, subjects are twofold, right and wrong, or veridical and distorted. Veridical is not something that if I go to my local market and I tell them that the price on the product is not veridical, they'll throw me out. It's not something that's common parlance around here.
They'll say, you're right, it's horizontal.
You know, I sometimes wonder if Jinpa like sits there with us, you know, with a thesaurus, and then he said, "Okay,
Jimpa
last
got
time
his
I used
PhD
that
from
used the
Oxford.
word
That's why.
truthful, I'll use
Yeah.
something else this
He
time."
got
You
his
know?
PhD from Oxford. That's why
Got
he
a
says
PhD
veridical.
from Oxford. He's influenced by some of these other Western philosophers and so forth that like to use these words. So it's a legitimate word, but it's just you could just say is, you know, as Jeffrey says, right and wrong.
Truth
Okay,
in Spanish is verdad.
say again.
Truth in Spanish is verdad, just
Right.
like you spell it here, veridical, like verdad.
Oh, okay, that's nice to know. Okay, not vertical, veridical.
Veridical, verdad.
Okay, good. Okay, so at that point, Jeffrey has this note when he's talking about what he translated as right and wrong. He mentions that the Tibetan at that point in Lama Tsongkhapa's text is Yang Dakpa and Lokpa. So you may be familiar, maybe when you recite the prayer of precepts and so forth, or other prayers, we say Yang Dakbar Zokbe Sangye. Yang Dakbar, in certain consequences, in certain circumstances, can mean perfectly. But here, with regard to subjects, Jeffrey says, as opposed to objects, I translate the terms as right and wrong. So Yang Dakpa means right subject. That means it is getting at its object, it is a correct subject. And Lokpa is a word we use often. We say distorted or wrong. With regard to consciousness, we say Lokpa is wrong. On the other hand, with regard to objects, I translate, Jeffrey says, Yang Dakpa is real. So when you're talking about objects, if something is Yang Dakpa, that means it is real. Or you can say true, I guess. And Lokpa is unreal or false. For interesting distinctions on these topics, see Hopkins' Maps of the Profound, pages 907 to 911. So where is Doris? Doris, do you have that PDF? Could you put that up? Is it in the chat? So there's another PDF I composed here, which you can see. If you click on it, this is an excerpt, not from the text that we've been quoting, the last final exposition on emptiness, but on Jeffrey Hopkins, what can you say, Paul? Opus? Well, he's had many opuses. His translation of Jamyang Shepa's tenets, but what section? Just the Madhyamaka section, or is it all of the tenets, even non-Buddhist tenets?
I thought it was the entirety.
Okay, it's a oh, my what is it called? My shoulders. So this is the text, and it's got small letters in it. It's not like, you know, some texts are rigid with big characters. So this is like, I don't know, 1,000 pages or something, isn't it? 1,000 and something at the end. Got my wrong glasses on. So this text is now that PDF, 1,091 pages, almost 1,100 pages. So this is from that text in what Jeffrey Hopkins had said in his footnote, asking about interesting, what did he say? For interesting distinctions on these topics, see Hopkins' Map of the Profound, that text, pages 907 to 911. So this PDF has pages 907 to 911. Okay, so let's take a look. So if you scroll down a little down that first page where you see the green, so it says the word commentary on the root text. So this means Jamyang Shepa wrote a root text to his tenets. So probably super long. I don't know. Just to memorize that is probably quite a task. But then this book is more or less the commentary on those root texts. So he would make reference, or Jeffrey is making reference to the root text that is being explained. So it says, word commentary on root text. A division of obscurational truths into real and unreal conventionalities does not exist in the middle way's own system. How would you translate that into English? Rachel. Can you see that? Can you see that? Did you yeah.
So in Madhyamaka, I had to exit out looking at it to answer you. Sorry. So
yeah.
In Madhyamaka, we wouldn't separate out real and unreal within conventional truths. So there wouldn't be that subdivision of conventional truth.
So it's only real conventional truths.
I would think that this wouldn't be an exclusive, like a dichotomy, but I don't.
Conventional truths are necessarily unreal or false or wrong. Okay, so from the Prajnanika point of view, remember, truth is that which the way that it appears coincides with the way it actually is. Like if someone smiles at you and says nice things, they actually mean it. That their mind, that corresponds to their mind. Whereas the car salesman or the political guy who says something, they're not true. They're not real. I mean, they're not true. So a division of obscurational truths, conventional truths, into real and unreal conventionalities does not exist in the Madhyamaka's system. Easy to understand, right? However, in the perspective of a worldly consciousness, like my dad when he was shaving, in the perspective of a worldly consciousness, a human face and a reflection of a face and so forth are suitable to receive the conventions true and untrue. It's okay, in other words, it's okay to say from a worldly perspective that the reflection of your face in a mirror can be called, of the convention, true, untrue, and that your actual face is true, right? From worldly perspective, like a mirage. Difference between a mirage and actual, a mirage of water, in which you imagine water somewhere, and actually seeing water. From the worldly perspective, the vision, the sight of actual Lamolazzo, some lake, with your eyes, that's true. Whereas you're seeing a mirage is untrue. True and untrue, okay? And hence, respectively, are mere real conventionalities and mere unreal conventionalities. Does that make sense? And hence are respectively mere real conventionalities. So that means not real conventionalities, because there's no conventionality that is real or true. That's the point. All the conventional, the mirage and the water are actually the same as being untrue, unreal. But from the worldly perspective, yeah, mirage of water can't, if you get there with your camel, you can't let your camel drink from that mirage, right? Okay. Jamyang Shepa's great exposition of tenets. I thought that's what this was.
I think he's referring to the root verse, the root verses, as opposed to the word commentary.
Okay. Jamyang Shepa's great exposition of tenets. Yeah, that I don't have that note here. It says, in the middle way's own system, the Majjhimaka system, in the middle way's own system, quote, in quotations, that means in that quotation above, citation above, that is to be taken as in the perspective of the middle way rational consciousness of the unique middle way system. This is Jamyang Shepa's commentary. What does that mean? Okay, everyone's looking like a deer in the headlights. John, what does that mean? This is a little bit challenging. So Jeffrey had mentioned in his note, take a look at this section from my maps of the profound, which is not Jeffrey's own composition. It's his translation of Jamyang Shepa with much analysis and notes and so forth. So it's that in terms of this distinction between conventional truths and ultimate truths. So Jamyang Shepa had said, in the middle way's own system, where did that come?
It was in his statement that real and unreal conventionalities don't exist.
Right. So that came. So commentary said a division of obscurational truths into real and unreal conventionalities does not exist in the middle way's own system. So now he says, in the middle way's own system, what does that mean? That is to be taken as in the perspective of the middle way, Majjhimaka, rational consciousness, which sometimes we translate as reasoning consciousness, of the unique middle way system. What's the unique middle way system? Stehi, do you have an idea? Doris knows.
Well, I was, sorry, my frog. I was thinking Prasangika.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. We'll see.
Awesome.
We're on the same wavelength there. If you're looking for something that's tasty and you don't have to put any sweetener in and it's good for your body, Lipton makes a turmeric tea, which I'm sipping on here. Very good. Okay. So in the middle, quote, in the middle way's own system, that is to be taken as in the perspective of the middle way rational consciousness of the middle way system. So that means in the unique middle way system. So if we were to take unique middle way system as Prasangika, what is a rational consciousness?
Presumably it's a reasoning consciousness engaging in ultimate analysis.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah. So that's the point. So in the perspective of a rational consciousness, what does that mean in the perspective love, Paul or John, or anyone else? What does that mean in the perspective of?
From the point of view of, is that equivalent to saying that?
So this is a very important concept that will come up more and more in the text. Geshe Sopo used to explain this in very, very great detail later on in the Buddha ground when we talk about the omniscient mind. So the omniscient mind perceives both the conventional truth and the ultimate truth simultaneously, right? Directly realizes the conventional truth and the ultimate truths, all of them, simultaneously. Whereas anyone who is not a Buddha has to alternate between a direct perception of ultimate truth and a direct perception of conventional truth. When you're in post-meditation, you can have direct perception of conventional truth. When you're in meditative equipoise with a rational consciousness, a reasoning consciousness, realizing emptiness, you can have a direct, as a fruit of that, you can have a direct realization of emptiness. But in the perspective of the omniscient mind's realizing emptiness, conventionalities do not exist. They do not appear. I'd like to see Luis's reaction to some of these. I'm a little bit shocked. In the perspective of the omniscient mind, even though the omniscient mind does realize conventional truths, in the perspective of the omniscient mind realizing emptiness, only emptiness appears. Conventionalities do not appear. In that perspective, more. So that means we say to the face of. What's another way that's translated, Paul? Do you know, or John?
More just like in the face of, usually, or something?
Yeah, in the face of, to the face of. So in the perspective, as Jeffrey is translating here, in this perspective, but he's not talking about the omniscient mind here, but in the perspective of the omniscient mind perceiving the ultimate emptiness, conventionalities do not exist. But in the perspective of the omniscient mind perceiving conventionalities, emptiness does not appear. Emptiness is not perceived. Okay, something that will come later, but that's this kind of stuff. So in the perspective of, that means like in your face.
This is translating.
What is there? So in its perspective, that means in the perspective of this rational consciousness, realizing consciousness of the Prasangika, it is not suitable to make a division of obscurational truths into the real, whose mode of appearance and mode of subsistence agree, and the unreal, whose mode of appearance and mode of subsistence do not agree. Because not only superiors meditative equipoise, Arya meditative equipoise on emptiness, but also their exalted wisdom, their gnosis subsequent to meditative equipoise, perceives forms and so forth as like illusions, and do not perceive, those Aryas do not perceive their mode of appearance and mode of subsistence in agreement. They perceive them like illusions. So like in the illusion-like meditation, after meditation on emptiness, right? Direct space-like meditation on emptiness. When you arise from that, everything appears to be truly existent, but by the force of your previous realization, they all appear to be kind of like illusory. They perceive forms and so forth as like illusions and do not perceive their mode of appearance and mode of subsistence in agreement. Technical way of saying the way that they actually exist. They don't perceive that they are actual these conventionalities are true. There's no true conventionalities for those who see reality, because once they arise from meditative equipoise and they're in that illusion-like meditative state, everything appears to be untrue, like illusions. Following? Making sense? Therefore, I think he left his ... so there must have been something he didn't want to translate. Therefore, obscurational truths are divided into the two, real and unreal, only relative to the perspective of coarse, innate worldly consciousnesses. So this is an important tenet of the Prasangika. From the Prasangika point of view, it is not legitimate. It's not correct to say that there are real and unreal obscurational truths, conventional truths. All conventional truths are unreal, is the point. It's only with respect to, relative to, the perspective of, again, with the perspective of coarse, innate, worldly consciousness, that they can be called true and untrue. You know, like the face in the mirror as opposed to an actual face, or the mirage as opposed to a pool of water. Making sense? More or less what we said before. So then, because the six senses, free from superficial damage, and the six objects apprehended by them are posited as real in the perspective of innate coarse consciousnesses. Who can translate that into English? It's English. I'm just joking. You know, make it a little more simple. The six senses. Are there six senses? I thought there were five senses. What's the sixth sense?
Consciousness.
The mental sense, or mental
sense faculty, yes.
Sense faculty, yeah. The six senses. So an eye faculty or sense, free from superficial damage, would mean one which is free from jaundice, where you might perceive things as yellow, free from the seeing floaters, where you might misperceive things falling into your soup. Also free from, so those of you studied Dura, well, who studied Lorig with us, so other sources of superficial damage here, is that the word to use, damage, or yeah, are, for instance, a mirror. So that is a source of a source of superficial damage, because when you look in the mirror, you could see a reflection that appears to be your face. In terms of the ear consciousness, would also include echoes in a cave and so forth. Anyway, the six senses, free from superficial damage, so they're really right on, correct, and the six objects apprehended by them are posited as real in the perspective of innate coarse consciousness. Coarse consciousnesses. So there's six consciousnesses, the mental consciousness. And the six senses having superficial damage, and the six objects apprehended by them are posited as unreal in the perspective of worldly consciousness. So a person who has a superficial source of damage to the eye sense, such as oxygen deprivation or reflection from the sky, seeing a white snow mountain thinking that it's blue, seeing that it's blue, peering, we say, a blue snow mountain. That would be, from the perspective of worldly consciousness, that's considered as unreal or untrue, right? Whereas seeing the white snow mountain would be considered to be true, conventional truth. But from Prasangika, even the white snow mountain is not true, right? Following? Okay. So just a little bit more. So the rest of this, if you have a chance to read and test yourself, a couple of the paragraphs I've got in yellow, just as a challenge to you to see if you can ferret them out. But I'll just read a little bit more. Proponents of the middle, and it's not clear what exactly that means. Even in the index of that text, it just gives a quotation from the text. Proponents, or it gives a notation of a page of the text. Proponents of the middle, I would imagine that means Madhyamikas in general, themselves also assert such real and unreal conventionalities relative to worldly valid cognition, but they conventionally do not assert the former type of real conventionalities relative to rational consciousness in their own system. What do you think that's referring to? Snehi, you look a little bit perturbed. Maybe proponents of the middle here means Svatantrika Madhyamikas. Not sure. So proponents of the middle themselves also assert such real and unreal conventionalities relative to worldly valid cognition. Does Prasangika assert such real and unreal conventionalities relative to worldly valid cognition?
Yes. Yes, it's
Yes.
to what was just
John
stated.
says yes. Rachel says,
Well, isn't that what he's talking about when he says, in the perspective of innate course consciousnesses? Just above, like what this distinction of talking about if the six senses are free from superficial damage and the six objects are apprehended by them are posited as real in the perspective of an innate course consciousnesses, that this is acceptable.
okay, so this is talking about coarse worldly consciousnesses. Here it says the proponents of the middle themselves also assert such real and unreal conventionalities relative to worldly valid cognition. So that would seem to be different than worldly coarse consciousness, right? Well, maybe not.
Yeah, I mean,
and innate course consciousness, yeah. Are those different?
well, I mean, I was thinking that, I mean, they would be different. I would have thought they would have been different if he hadn't used the word worldly, right? I mean, normally we talk about valid cognition and, and not valid cognition and so on, but we don't talk about worldly. In this case, since he's using the word worldly, I would expect it to be the same thing as the course consciousness.
Worldly valid cognition. Okay, let's see. Let's just finish that sentence and then we'll continue on in the text. Just as a sort of a taste, priming the pump for you to read the rest of these 4 pages and some good mind twisters. As Jeffrey had said, there's interesting distinctions here. So proponents of the middle themselves also assert such real and unreal, then he has in brackets, conventionalities relative to worldly valid cognition, but they conventionally do not assert the former type of real, meaning conventionalities relative to rational consciousness. So the distinction is being made here between worldly valid cognition and rational consciousness, reasoning consciousness. So reasoning consciousness is delving into, is what does ultimate analysis, right? So worldly valid cognition does not involve itself in ultimate analysis. It is only, like there is fire because there is smoke. On the smoky path, fire exists because smoke exists. Valid cognitions like this, valid cognition of seeing with your eyes and so forth. That none of that, that's all on the conventional level. None of that involves reasoning, consciousness, analyzing the ultimate. Nadine, are you okay with this? Making sense?
Yes, this makes sense.
Okay, I've gone over so much. Sorry. So let me just read here then. I'll leave that PDF for you to download. And the other one, if you're interested to investigate that. Where did we go? Of the two objects and subjects within conventional truth, of the two objects and subjects within conventional truth, to state the class of subjects includes, from the perspective of worldly cognition, both those that are veridical and those that are distorted. The text says, so this is where we'll begin next time. This is verse 24 of the 6th chapter of the Karikas, the Madhyamaka Karikas, that, Chandrakirti writes his own Bhashyam to. False vision is also said to be of two kinds. So this is talking about from the subject side. False vision is said to be of two kinds, of clear senses and of impaired senses. Cognitions deriving from impaired senses are said to be distorted compared to those of the unimpaired, to the ones that have clear senses. Okay, wow. We covered some ground. What do you think, Rocio? Exhausted mentally? There's a prayer to behold the face of Vajrayogini written by, was it Losel Gyatso, I think. Snei, didn't I send you that prayer? You said it wasn't in the, I didn't send you, I will send you. That's it. You said that wasn't usually in the Vajrayogini sadhana of the Sakya tradition.
No, it is in the long
Oh, it is,
sadhana.
okay, I'm mistaken. Okay, so Losel Gyatso was a famous Sakya Lama, long time ago, wrote many interesting things. And this prayer is often recited. And there's one verse about the mind being exhausted, the youthful mind being exhausted by its elaborations, or maybe better translated as the youthful mind, which can have the implication as blissful mind, because when we talk about the gurus and so forth as having the aspect of being 16 years old or even 12 years old, the implication is that there is that sense of bliss that one has as the hormones first emerge, sort of like in puberty sort of a thing. So the youthful mind, the blissful mind, having exhausted its exact elaborations. So hopefully after this, and you think for a week, and on Monday you come to class, you can exhaust some more of those mental elaborations in your mind, and then you can rest in the forest hut beyond elaborations. That was a verse from that verse. Are you familiar with that, Snehi? Do you recite that? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So any last questions? Okay. So as I mentioned, our dear member Mikhail's mom died this morning. That's why he wasn't here. Several other people have messaged that they were on trips and couldn't come. Stephen is not here. Richard is not here. They all sent their excuse, the doctor's slip. So as we're dedicating merits, to try to think of Utta, if I pronounce correct.
Utta.
Yeah, Utta. What is Stephen's last name?
Azuma.
Azuma. Utta Azuma, who just passed away.
Mikhail's.
Mikhail Landu.
What did I say? Stephen, yeah, Mikhail's mom passed away, not Stephen's. Think that due to these merits, may they contribute to her taking this auspicious moment, another auspicious moment of a life of leisure and endowment, meeting the perfect Mahayana guru who will lead her, begin her on the path that leads to enlightenment. So, Snehi, if you'd like to put up the dedication prayers. Due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha. It doesn't say state in the Tibetan. Lama Sangye Jugyune. May I become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that enlightened state. So that alone has so much meaning. And then the prayer of bodhicitta. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow in mine and others' continua, mental continua, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Even though this is written as a prayer, you can think of it as a dedication. Due to these merits, may that be. And then the prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Fearless teacher and assembly of children of the conquerors, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang, the spiritual father and his sons, together with your lineages, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow upon us now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer, that this prayer might come true. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, were the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. And at this point, I'm going to hold this beautiful stupa on my head with Lama Zopa's Rinpoche's relics within it. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. At this I lost hope. Nonetheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta, of the bodhisattvas, the mind generation of the children of the victorious ones. By those truths, which truths? Blessing, the oceanic blessings of the three jewels, and the fact that bodhisattvas have actual bodhicitta. May the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. Then finally, you who are my eyes, reviewing all the infinite scriptures, we're getting into them for understanding them. You are the supreme gateways for us, we fortunate beings traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends. The implication being here, please live long and stable lives. So, smaller group today, but I thought, what did you think? Material? Good material, right? I thought it was this is a really interesting section. And, you know, in order to really understand what conventional truth means. So I hope you get a chance to go back and read again, go over the PDFs that are supplied, read ahead. And as, like, for instance, there's some other books like, I think, Ron, you've mentioned sometimes the Two Truths by, what's his name?
Guy Newland.
Guy Newland and other texts like that. If you have them, consult that because they're all be talking about the same thing. Thank you very much. Again, think of Uta Azuma. Uta
Landru.
I cannot say Azuma. Landru, yes. Mikhail's mom. I'm very, very sorry. Excuse me.
Venerable George, maybe something's also happening for Stephen's mother.
Yes.
Is that right?
Stephen's mother is, I think, sick. Is that right? Doris, do you remember? I think he's gone off to be with her.
Yes, he's in Canada visiting his mom, who's in the hospital with a terminal cancer diagnosis.
Right. So we could think of her also, as we dedicated before. So thank you very much for participation. I would love to see you on Monday, but who knows? You'll find something else to do. But anyway, next Saturday, and then next Saturday, I think will be the last class of this unit. Is that right? Before we have a 5-week break. So look forward to seeing you then for sure. And hopefully Cyril's microphone will be fixed by then. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you very much.
George. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable
so
George.
much. Thanks, Anaine.